Welcome to our cross-border conversation, creating and managing effective international co-productions and collaborations. Thank you to Genelec for supporting this series of talks.
Hi, I'm Tulasi. I'm a documentary producer director. I create kind of access-led character-filled insights into somebody's world using a bit of humor and heart. I work across TV and independent docs, and I'm currently based in London.
I'm Katey Lee Carson. I'm a writer, director, and producer. I do everything in terms of fiction, documentary, whatever is out there, TV. And I come from Cape Town, South Africa originally, but I'm currently working between all over Europe and in the UK.
I am Joseph Akama. I am from Cameroon. I am a screenwriter and a director, not a producer. I'm working mostly in films. I have two short films and a feature film. Right now, I mostly work in Cameroon, but I am gradually building a relationship around Europe for starters, and with a few projects which are still very, very, very early development in the United States.
My name's Kathleen Walfish. I'm a music supervisor and a producer from the UK originally, but I now live in Berlin. So I work mainly with US, UK markets. I'm still discovering the German market. I work mainly in feature films, so have lots of experience at dealing with colleagues across the US, UK, and Europe.
I'm actually really, really curious, Kathleen, what have you learned about the German market and how do you feel it is going as someone coming from the UK? Is it very different? How are you finding that collaboration?
Yeah, every market is like its own kind of microcosm because what's been particularly interesting for me is that I'm in prep for a US Polish co-production at the moment, and we've also been doing a lot of outreach over the past year to Poland and trying to understand that market. And again, that was different from Germany, just in terms of ways of working and communication, that kind of thing. So I think that, yes, every market is its own kind of microcosm. In Germany, for me, it's been slightly different in that the job that I tend to do, which is music supervisor, there are far fewer of us in Germany because it's not been something that people hire for here as much. And I guess that's because often music supervisors are hired on productions that are maybe larger or bigger, sort of larger feature films or ongoing series. And in Germany, very often, if you have a big major project that's coming in, it might be coming in from the outside, so say from the US or something. So it's been interesting to me to see where I can kind of fit in within that market and just, yeah, in general, just see how everyone networks and maintains contact. And luckily, we have the Berlinale here every year, which is fantastic. It's a great way to meet people because it's one of the major festivals. Yes, but yeah, certainly it's. I would say that the majority of my work is still UK, US.
That's a really, really interesting point, actually, because a lot of us working in these European countries will be doing UK, US films at the end of the day that have a local component because they're filming there, because there's a tax credit, because the crew is cheaper, because they need the locations. So already, I think what we're seeing in the industry in general is this massive push towards the co-production. And I'm very, very happy about it. Not just on a big scale, like what you're talking about when the US and the UK come in, but also on a small scale, because what it allows to do is put together movies that are on much smaller budgets. So people can get 300,000 from France, 300,000 from Germany, 300,000 from the UK, and shoot it in Poland and then deal with all those issues later. But it just makes for this process that where 300,000 might not be enough to get a fiction feature off the ground. If you knock on the door of different countries, maybe you'll get that budget. And it's very exciting. I think it's an exciting time to be here, even though people can be very negative at the moment about how things are going in the industry. I would go the opposite way and say never before have we had so much access to each other, so much openness to different languages together in film. people that read subtitles. I mean, this is great, you know, all of these things. I don't know if you have a comment on that, Joseph.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. We live in an ever expanding world, and long are the days where European audience will be stuck to European movies, African audience to African movies, American. The world is opening, and I think it is a big opportunity right now for international collaboration between different countries and continents and culture. Like you can imagine a mixture of music, a narrative perspective, and you put all that blend in a movie, and it brings something fresh, something original. And I think we live in the best time ever. Thank you, Katey.
In the UK, in terms of kind of what we consume, we're seeing these two very clear trends. And one is, we only want to see, we only sell the programs that look very similar to the things that we've already seen, or have the celebrities that we all know. And it's so lots of just like very insular, what we know. But then on the other hand, there's this huge stream that's massively taking off, which is just like dramas from Nordic countries with languages you don't speak, and then from Korea, and then, you know, this huge push to like shows in languages you don't speak with stars you've never heard of, and just kind of subject matters that sometimes are so outside of your own world. So it's a really interesting kind of dichotomy, I think, where it's currently we're seeing either something we completely know in and out, and on the other hand, we're seeing something we don't know anything about. And I'm not sure what that says.
I think it says it's great that our audience is expanding and opening and is open to these kind of, you know, topics and themes. And I think we could put it back into kind of hopefully something that our audience can take away with them. I think one of the things that you brought up, Tulasi, which is really, really interesting, is that, you know, people are more open and they're watching new topics. But I think also very important not to force a co-production. So for instance, not to say, okay, I need UK money, let me make this character British, you know, when it doesn't kind of fit the story, because I think that's also happening quite a bit. So a number one lesson, don't try and force it just for the money. I think that's a very dangerous, slippery slope. A trailer for a recent short film that I made, we shot it completely in Berlin, but the crew is from everywhere and the cast is from everywhere. And I'll let you watch the clip, and then I will tell you about my experience of not forcing something when it's not supposed to be that way.
Team stand by.
He had some last-minute ideas. Just stick to our script, and you'll be fine. We good? Sophie? Are we good?
Of course. Okay, Henry. Let's try this again.
The trailer is very short, but I don't know if you heard, all of the actors have a totally different accent. We have American, we have French, and we have British. And I had a cast of 15 characters. And we had no money to make the film, which is always the case. But we had a ton of Berlin, and we said, let's shoot it in Berlin. And I was adamant that the lead female should be a very clean British English speaker. And at the end of the day, Camille Rutherford was just the best person for the part. And we just embraced the French accent. And honestly, it elevated the film to something that I wouldn't have imagined it could have been. And I was very, very nervous about whether the audience would accept this kind of multinational room. You know, where are we? You know, you think to yourself, are they going to be asking themselves constantly, where the hell are we? But they don't. You know, it's a film. They buy into it. And as long as it's natural and it hasn't been forced, they can get behind it. And I think the worst thing that I could have done would be to force Camille to speak with a British accent, or to have not taken her in favor of a British actress. So very superficial level, but something just to get the ball rolling on how these different collaborations and the differences between the different countries can be such a strong thing for film.
One scenario that I have encountered is where a co-producer in a particular country says, wait a minute, we think you maybe need to make a few changes because this isn't perhaps culturally quite correct. And of course, there are times where you want and need to listen to that, particularly if it's say a topic that's been written about from an outsider perspective, even if you've done as much research as you can. I think it's important not to feel sort of held by the restrictions that your co-producer is putting on it because of financial incentive, but equally to be able to listen and communicate with each other if someone has a point that they want to make about something that's they definitely have more cultural awareness of, because we all know how we'd feel if someone came into the country. If I'm Scottish, and we have very strong identity, and I think of all those times like with Braveheart, or these
bring up Braveheart. I knew it.
but do you know what I mean? It's that you want to feel like, okay, I'm being respectful of someone else's culture, and but at the same time not making so many concessions that it completely alters the project just because there's the financial incentive coming from there, or whatever incentive or requirement it is that you're shooting or partnering there. It would be so great just to hear about everyone's different experiences of actually partnering with other countries. And Tulasi, I was wondering what sort of productions do you work on with? Do you work on a lot of co-pros, or because you're in London now, right?
Yeah, I have not done very many co-productions at all, because in TV it's a lot more straightforward. There's a lot of there may be money coming in from like other countries, like you kind of referred to, but it's more of this major TV channel is also paying for the show, so it'll kind of automatically transition across, and then the decisions made, if there are any related to what that country wants, is just mostly in the edit, whether they need like a 55-minute one or a 45-minute episode because they're going to add more ads. It's very kind of simple in that sense. I think my experience is much more in terms of cross-border collaboration. So how do you set up a shoot in a country that you're not currently in, and how do you make sure that you stick to schedule when nobody has any idea how the parking is going to go? Or I've got in terms of my independent films, most of the producers I've worked with live in completely different countries to me. So that's been a very big learning journey. Is how do you, one of my producers for the short film that I'll show later, she lives like 10-minute walk from me, so it's very easy. But then I have a producer who lives in Australia, and we have to kind of work out like how do we make sure that we are kind of understanding the film together and building on that, because actually there's so much that you can actually get done if you're just in a room together.
I think I've been blessed with my co-producers and with my collaboration. I haven't had a lot of issues about now, but you bring up a point which I think is very important. It is when we're talking about leverage in international collaboration. Usually, even if we are culturally open-minded and we want to bring everyone want to bring a piece of his culture, a piece of himself in the picture, it ultimately it boils down to who has the most leverage in the project. So, for example, in Cameroon, there is little to no film industry. So most of the time when we are producing, we are getting funding from outside the country. And I'll let you guys imagine how tough it is to negotiate and try to keep a piece of your own when you're on a negotiation table and you're not bringing much. like you can have for the co-productions from co-producers from France, Germany, England, and each of them are bringing like 25%, and you're like 2%. How do you fight? How do you fight to keep your perspective, your ideas? So I haven't been in that situation, but I think it is something to consider, and it is something to know how to work around when you are engaging with collaborators and producers from everywhere, from a lot of places around.
That's a really interesting point, and I guess that it's from my perspective, so much of this, as you all know, so much of it is about communication, and I think, and communicating effectively, and lots of people have, even between the US and the UK, have different communication styles. I guess it's really important to kind of keep track of what's important on the project. So it's very easy to get bogged down in smaller details as you're working through the schedule. And for me, there will be either sometimes there's certain things that I have maybe thought was quite important, but because of communication issue, it's actually the rest of the team are maybe working on a much bigger picture thing. And I think that becomes more apparent when you are, like you were saying, Tulasi, that if you are not in the same room, it can be much more difficult. And for me, the beginning of working with a new production team is always about, for me, it feels like you just want to, sometimes it's really easy, but sometimes it's not so easy to iron out all of these different communication styles, and also really when everyone's extremely busy, understandably, to actually zone in on, okay, this is what we're looking at today, this is what's super important. And yeah, I think it's just really, for me, a huge part of my job is just keeping the communication open and having an understanding of what is important to other people on a given day, as part of the bigger picture. And to your point about leverage, for me, I feel like it's sometimes about reminding people, okay, this is the reason why we're doing this or this, and but again, it's just down to communication and really figuring out what's the most important thing for everyone.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question that maybe we should all answer, is kind of when you're starting a new production and you're working with people all across the world, how do you kind of go about taking into account all these different nations and different ways of working, and how do you go about building a bond?
I would say, I think it starts, I mean, Joseph makes a good point. From the get-go, there's always going to be someone in your project that has more power. And it normally is the person who brings the most money. I'd love to say it's the person who has the vision and wrote the story, but that's just not the reality. But it is the person who brings the money. So I would say that I know that it's very difficult and projects are really hard to get off the ground, but what I would say is really take your time in choosing your collaborators. Talk to them and make sure that you are making the same film. Because if you're not making the same film from day one, it's never going to be, you're never going to be on the same page. You've got to make sure that you have the same goal, or at the very least that someone's going to come onto your project that's going to make it better. It has to be first allegiance to the story. Otherwise, we're always just bending down to money and its will. So I think that's always my first thing, is just I try my best to work with people that I really want to work with, that I feel like bring something to the project and I think can get it off the ground. And then, like Kathleen said, communication, and listening. Listening to what your collaborator is telling you and realizing that every single film industry is different. I've made films in Rome and films in Sicily, which is the same country, but they have totally different production styles and totally different roles that don't exist in my film industry, or they're missing roles. And I think you just have to listen and realize that everyone's been making movies forever and everyone has something good to add to it. Listening to what they're saying and why they make things their way, which I think Tulasi really kind of links into your cross-border collaboration. When you say, this happens a lot, that we're sending a shoot, we're sending a New York shoot, let's say, we hire a team in New York to do 2 shots because no one can afford to go there. That communication is just like, it's paramount. You've got to be on the same page, especially if you're dealing with something like VFX, where the communication, you get one note wrong and all your shots are yellow. So, I think that collaboration of cross-border collaboration with different cultures, different cities is a skill that every filmmaker has to beef up in a big way.
Absolutely. I remember a few years back, I think in 2023, we were producing a TV show with a French, with a big French channel. We had a big fight during the writing process because of the perspective they had from the teenage African woman and our own perspective of a teenage African girl. Like we had an argument to the point where we actually hit a hiatus because they had their own perspective of how a young girl in her 16, 17 would behave. And we were like, oh, but we are living here. They are around us every day. How can you tell us how you think they behave? Like it was a big fight, and they actually wanted to pull out of the project because they felt like we weren't listening to them. They felt like we were just like wanting to do what we had in our mind, and it was kind of frustrating for both of us. So communication is very important, but also listening. And I think this is very important in international collaboration because absolutely everyone will have his point of view. Like you said, Katey, everyone has been making film for forever, and nobody wants to back down. Like at some point, it becomes like an ego fight, an ego war where everybody wants to bring something. Everybody wants his presence to be felt on the project. So effective communication and human management skills, I think they are paramount. At the end of the day, the project didn't hold. Sorry. But it was a great experience, and I think it helped me grow better and understand that when you're getting into a cross-border collaboration, there are things you have to let go, and there are things you have to accept.
It sounds like the kind of thing where you were right to kind of stand your ground because you understand what young women in Cameroon are like much more than what the French broadcaster does, right? So it seems like that was the right thing to stand your ground on.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is very important to hold to what you believe. It is very important to not let your project be denatured and twisted because you want it to be made. Because at the end of the day, you might have your project made, but if you're looking at it and you're like, this is not my project, I mean, it's a bigger loss. So yeah, I think you're perfectly right on that.
But I also realized that saying no in this business is very hard. We all tend to say yes, and we all want to finance our projects, which is really, really hard. And I think that one of the best lessons I've learned, probably from being a PA for a very long time, is diplomacy, getting your way subtly and diplomatically. And, Joseph, you bring up a good point. It can never be about ego, especially in a co-production. If it's about ego, you've lost, you've already lost the battle. It has to be about the story, and all of your argumentation for getting things the way that you want them to be better be valid and rooted in making a better project. Because as soon as you put your ego in there, it's just never going to work. Co-production means a lot more people can make decisions on your project, and they are valid, and they may do that, and that is their right, and they put money in. So it's absolutely fabulous on the one side because, we have these cultural collaborations, but you also have to admit to yourself that with every partner that you're bringing on, they're not just bringing things, they're also taking things away creatively, but also production-wise, to bring it back to actual physical production. Every time you bring on a country in your co-production, every time you get money from someplace, that money will come with its own attachments. That money will come with a set of rules of how you have to spend it. So, aside from the fact that it's a very complicated production legal mess, your film, which might be about a woman from the UK living in Paris, where you expected to have a lot of UK cast as her friends, perhaps that's not possible. Where you wanted UK writers, perhaps that's not possible. So, I think we also could talk a little bit about, maybe Kathleen, if you have something to add, this dynamic of it brings and it takes away the co-production.
Yeah, totally. I'm not so often involved in the actual financing of projects, but as you are, perhaps, Katey, because you've got very much your own projects that you want to have finance. And what it does make me think about is actually this process of finding collaborators, and how do we do that? Where are they effective? Are there any particular ways that effective ways that you've found to actually be able to meet collaborators and people that are interested? And I mean, beyond just sort of growing your network, but how do you actually persuade people to say, right, okay, I'm going to put money in, and particularly if it's not in the same country? Are there any? Sorry I don't want to just bat the question back at somebody else, but it's just I wonder if that might be a more effective thing for people to hear about from someone else rather than me.
Finding collaborators, first of all, could be anything and anywhere. I think that's a big thing in our business, and it's a beautiful thing in our business, is that somebody who is an assistant today, next month and in 2 years could be, the head of Netflix. It's just like, it's that kind of, So number one golden rule: be nice to everyone. Be nice to everyone, because absolutely everyone in this business is a contact, whether they're a financier or not, because finance is the big golden goose, and I'll get to it. But I think, we're finding on a lot of projects where our budgets are getting squeezed and squeezed. And on the Secret Assistants, the trailer that I showed you guys, that was made by a very, very high caliber crew that normally charge very, very expensive rates. But they're people that I've worked with in the industry for years and years. And I knocked on their door and I said, we're paying everyone in this film the same day rate. That was our financial kind of idea, was that every single person, from the PAs to the producers, would get exactly the same day rate. And if you're interested, come on board. And then I can only do that because I've always treated the film industry like gathering contacts wherever you can be. When it comes to financiers, that one is it's tough. It's very tough to find money out there. You have your traditional routes, which I think everybody knows about, which is, I guess, knocking on the big door or sending the big email. And do that. Absolutely. No reason not to. They might not reply, but who cares? But also going to all of the events, your local film festival, the festival a 3-hour drive away, constantly supporting those kind of grassroots filmmaking events, I think, is where you can make a lot of contacts.
I am not very extrovert person, so it is kind of very hard for me to go to with people. I'm trying my best, but I'm always failing terribly in that part. Even when I go to festivals, like with the idea of networking, like slightly, I almost end up like being alone on my corner. But I feel like yes, it's something to work on, but also I believe that you have to leave artists do the arts, and they are the producers and the other people, like do let them do their thing, like not every artist is it's like you, Katey, like you seem like a very open person, like a very charismatic person, and I feel like not everyone is like that. But you bring up a very important point, and I am absolutely 100% with you. Like everybody counts, everybody is important, and everybody can bring something.
This idea as well, and this has also come up with the co-production, sorry to change the topic, that the writer-director also has to go out and find their financing. is becoming much more common. It might not be in the form of money, but it has transformed in the form of cast. So, you know, you're a writer, director, and then you also have to bring the cast alongside. I think if I could choose, I wouldn't be producing, but I don't think I have a choice. You know, I'd love to meet my producer and, like, you know, be with them, and it's wonderful and glorious. But that just didn't happen for me. And I think it's a little bit of a problem that this is happening, that, you know, you have to have your projects at such a finalized stage in order for anyone to even read them or consider them. I don't know if you guys are finding the same thing. I don't know, Tulasi, maybe in documentary, it's not so much like that.
No, it's very similar. My theory is because of the internet and all of the short films we're effectively seeing on social media constantly, there's much less of an appetite for risk. And so people want to kind of see, like, okay, but what are you really talking about? Because if I could kind of grab a star off of YouTube and with their kind of script in place, then I already kind of know what I'm going to get. So I want the same from you. And whether that's a documentary or fiction, I think it's very similar. I mean, I have producers, but I do get involved in, like, trying to raise money because, first of all, I mean, it just doesn't feel fair to let them do all the work when I want the film made as well. But also, I think it makes it a lot easier if you're working together towards it. And speaking of what you were saying earlier, Katey, in your film, where you got, like, a lot of people that you know to kind of work for lesser rates, I'm going to show you a little bit from my documentary, The Coolest Girl in School, which is about my friend who has chronic fatigue syndrome. And this has not been color graded. We're at the end of the edit right now. So many people on this film are working with the expectation that when we kind of get more money in, we'll pay them, or we've gotten a bit of money in, so we're paying them a little bit now, or they're working on reduced rates because they have normal jobs that pay them plenty and they're doing this out of passion.
I have used these before. Yeah.
In
a picture. I've used these before in a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I use them. I needed help with them, but because they're very heavy. But I used them before and just I lay down and put them on my body to represent the feeling that I feel when I'm going through a crash of ME. And because it feels like you're being crushed. Like, so I had several of them on my body. Yeah.
This is a story about the coolest girl in school, my old friend Noli. She had a pink streak in her hair, safety pins in her jeans, and people were drawn to her in a way they never were to me. At a time where I felt broken for the ways in which I was different, Noli seemed not to care what others thought. I was sure she would end up ruling the world. Instead, she ended up in bed.
It's been a really long process. I think we've been working on it for 3 years. And, you know, if you have the money in one go, it's obviously going to go a lot faster. But I think there is something really beautiful in kind of finding people who care about the film and thus are willing to work for it in different ways. And hopefully you can pay them what they're worth in the end.
Oh my God, Tulasi, that's heartbreaking. I hope she's fine.
Yes, sorry. Yes, I should say. So we were able to make the film because she is in recovery and she's doing a lot better. But yeah, no, it's mad. For 4 years, she was basically had like 10 minutes of energy a day. She at one point couldn't digest food. She didn't have enough energy for that, so she was drinking liquid food. And she was very lucky. She had a mum she could move back in with who could support her, and you know, and she recovered. But there are so many people out there with chronic fatigue syndrome, and we don't really hear about them because they don't have the energy to kind of come up and draw our attention.
You know, it's so important that you were able to get the documentary made and you're able to, I mean, you're still in the process, but to actually be able to highlight these topics that maybe I can absolutely see this perhaps fitting in on, on a major broadcaster, but it doesn't necessarily follow that just because you take that idea to them, they're going to program it. So I think it's great that you're able to just take that very important project and actually be able to highlight that issue.
I would like to take Tulasi's project to actually ask a question, coming back to international collaboration. How do you find collaborators or financiers or co-producers or partners for a personal project? Like when you want to go about, I don't know if any one of you already had like a personal project that's like intimately related to you, like the documentary we've just seen from Tulasi. How is it? Maybe Tulasi can answer the question. Like, how is it to looking for international partners and collaborators for a project you don't necessarily know they will abide to. You don't necessarily know people will want to engage in that project with you.
In this case, you can see me in the film, and that kind of, as we went further and further through the construction of the film and the edit, we realized that I need to be in the film more and more. And now, like, there's a final scene with me in it, which we only realized we needed in the edit. And it's a phone call between myself and Nolly, and we filmed both sides, mine in London and hers in Holland. To start off with, it wasn't quite as personal as it was. It was obviously somebody I knew personally, but it was much more purely about her and her artwork. I think the fact that it's personal also really appeals to a lot of people, because they know that I care about the subject. And so if they care about the subject and the person, then they can trust 100% that I am going to do what it takes to kind of get it over the line and to tell it in an ethical and empathetic way. So I do think it kind of depends on who you go to, right? Like, I never pitched this film to any broadcasters. And, you know, some people think that maybe I should, but I kind of felt that this was never going to be the kind of film in my heart that was going to be broadcasted. Actually, to your earlier point, Joseph, like, you want to make the film that you want to make. And possibly I was so protective of this film, partially because it was my close friend. And so it takes a bit longer to kind of find the right people. But once you have the right people, it's really good.
It goes, yeah.
Dans mon village, les gens se tuent et se sacrifient dans le monde des rêves. Et quelque temps après, les gens sacrifiés dans les rêves finissent toujours par mourir dans la réalité. Donc, oui, c'est devenu important de se souvenir de ces rêves.
Mais c'est effrayant. Tu sais, moi-même, je ne sais pas de quoi je rêve. Et même si je le fais, j'ai tout oublié au réveil.
Mon père dirait que tu es un cadavre qui mâche. Il avait aussi son bon côté.
Il te manque.
This was my very first international collaboration. It was, we shot a film, Into the Dam. We shot it in 2019 with the Goethe Institute from Germany. And originally, I was supposed to travel to Germany to shoot the film, but COVID happened and everything, and I had to rewrite the whole film in Cameroon. But I really loved the leeway I got from the Goethe Institute. Like, they gave me the money and they said, do the film. We just want the film. And I think this is like the golden partners you would want to have. Like, they will just let you. And the lead actress in the film was also a German actress. So working with a German actress as an English and French speaker, it was a very great opportunity to learn. And I had like something around 8,000 euros to shoot the film, which was a lot at the time, but for a first-time director an hour. And I really enjoyed the opportunity, but also the liberty to write a story, to shoot a story, and just have the funding, which I think it is a very rare opportunity today for most filmmakers. And I think I'm happy to be part of that. Thank you.
What was the reasoning for getting the funding from the Goethe Institute?
So they launched it back in 2018. They launched a national screenwriting competition, which I won, and the prize was 8,000 euros. So originally it wasn't 8,000 euros. Originally it was something like 4,000. But I had to go and shoot a movie in Germany. But due to COVID, I had to do everything back in Cameroon, which, to be honest, I prefer. Because I don't think I would have this liberty if I had gone to Germany. Yeah.
So you ended up shooting in Cameroon,
In
even
Cameroon,
though
yeah.
because of COVID.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's a benefit, I guess.
We've got a question. It says, how do the collaborations work in terms of accounting and getting tax credit in each country? Now, I don't know that I'm the best person to give a broad overview of that, but perhaps someone else would like to answer.
Tax credit is a simple one. You get money back on whatever you spend in the country. So anything that you spend outside of the country will not get your tax credit. I mean, every country has a different tax credit. It's all, wheels within wheels. And also, your budget does have to be big enough to classify for the tax credit as well. So, when we hear these big numbers like, I don't know where, offers 40%, bear in mind that's for everything over 25 million. So it's very specific research, but luckily every country does have a handy website or a film commission, and you can look it up and check it there. But in terms of getting the tax credit during a co-production, that always ends up being a little bit of a fight. To see where should we spend and how do we get that back. But actually, it really depends on how you set up your co-production and the rules and the regulations in the country at the time.
And I guess the other thing to remain aware of is that there are very often particular dates that you have to submit applications by. So I think it's really good to be aware of those as early as possible, so that say if they're going to release a load of funding in January in a year, and then not until a year later or a few months later, I guess that's important to be aware of.
And also important to remember that the tax credit is very separate from a co-production. You don't have to be a co-production to qualify for tax credit. Tax credit is literally just, I'm filming in Berlin, I get this tax credit, or Germany, Berlin, wherever you want to do. So you don't have to have a partner in Germany to do that. You just have to spend money in Germany. If you're thinking your next step is co-production, and you're thinking, I would really like to get some money from there and some money from there, or work with producers from the UK or producers from France, bear this in mind when you're putting your project together. And I mean when you're writing it, when you're developing it. Develop the stories that will go in that way naturally, so that you don't end up with a script that's finished and then you go, oh, I want money from Spain, so I'll put in a flashback to the Spanish Civil War, all of these things. I think that it's really important. I don't think it's fair, like what we were saying with Joseph, that the director has to do all of these things, writer-director. But I think it is really smart that if you're thinking, I want to do a co-production, you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to set it up that way from the script level, from a writing level. And then it opens up a lot more doors later on. That would be my tip.
Open-mindedness as well, and listening, having an open mind, and be ready from the get-go to know that, like Katey said, you're going to lose a bit, you're gonna win some. So like having an open mind and be open to collaboration, and be able to communicate, and diplomacy. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Be diplomatic enough. Thank you.
I think I want my tip to be very practical. So I'll say that what I found when working collaboratively with somebody who lives in a completely different time zone and part of the world as you, what I found is just having regularly scheduled calls. So like with my Australian producer, it's Monday nights at 8 p.m. my time, and which is like 7 in the morning for her. And that just works a dream, because that is never a time that I would otherwise kind of think to keep free. And if you've just got it always in place, it works really well. And I think in a corollary to that, if you're working internationally, the things that you're missing out on are, I think, a lot of the kind of soft skills and soft interactions with people. So like you don't like grab a coffee with somebody who's in Australia if you're in London. So you need to kind of build in that time to actually just sit and chat and like have a call that's not going to be about work at all, so that you can like build on each other as human beings as well.
Yeah.
That's ideal, really, isn't it? And I like that tip, because then you are scheduling in something so you don't feel like you know that time's there, and you don't feel like, oh, am I going to bother them with another question? You know, you just know, okay, I can manage without that information for a few days. I can ask them in our scheduled chat, and that's a really nice feeling, actually. I think that's such a great idea. I was just gonna say, for me, at the beginning of a production, it's really important for me to clarify the scope of the work that I'm going to be doing, particularly with a role like music supervision. And there are many other roles that probably fall under a similar bracket in different productions. The role can vary from production to production. So I might be going into production thinking, oh, they probably want me to do this, this, and this, say clearance, maybe a bit of on-camera musician work, and some playlisting. Maybe that's what they want me to do, but it's so important to actually define, okay, please let me know what exactly it is you want me to do and what you need me to stay clear of. Because there's nothing worse than having a conversation and for someone to say, we don't need that, or why are you bothering me with this? And that's the kind of thing I always want to avoid, because I just want to keep everything streamlined as much as possible in these sort of cross-border conversations. So yeah, that would be my tip, I guess.
A huge thank you to our speakers for this excellent and informative talk.